Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Pilates Goddess podcast. And thank you so much for coming back and spending some time listening to me yet again. I am so thrilled at the response to this podcast. And I encourage any of you who still like what I have to say to go over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a review. Reviews are free. And they're super helpful. So I would love it if you would leave the Pilates Goddess podcast a review over on Apple Podcasts. So today we are going to talk about how Pilates doesn't have to be so complicated. And I'm going to give you a little background into how this discussion came into my brain. You may know that I am the bone health expert at Anna Pereira's The Wellness Universe. And it is such a fabulous group of really, really talented and just high quality business people and other folks within the wellness universe. And I am teaching a 6-month free donation-based only online course partnered with them on exercise for bone health, strength, and mobility. You may know that one of my niche markets is women over 50 with osteoporosis and or chronic pain. And that's, the market obviously that I'm targeting in this free series. And I will put a link to it in the show notes. So if you're interested in checking it out, you can. The next live event is tomorrow, Tuesday, August 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. It runs 90 minutes. We basically do a half an hour of lecture, a half an hour of working out, and then a half an hour of questions and answers and discussion. And it's really been great. And if you go over and register now, you can listen to or watch the first 2 video trainings and be completely up to date on the course. Meanwhile, one of the women who is taking the course with me emailed me and asked me if I knew of any Pilates teachers or personal trainers near Toronto, who could help her do the exercises as I'm teaching them. And the woman I sent her to, it turns out, is like an hour and a half away, and it's just way too far. So we started talking about maybe training her, since in addition to being very talented at what she does, she's also a certified fitness trainer, and possibly training her trainer in the gym. But in this kind of discussion, as we were having it, she said something to me in an email, which was interesting. And what she said was, I have tried Pilates in the past and I really like your approach, but I didn't like Pilates. Now, of course, if you know me, you know that I teach Pilates. Even if I'm teaching other forms of movement or even other exercises, or I'm in the gym or I'm doing TRX or kettlebell training or whatever, I'm still teaching Pilates. It all comes from my base as a Pilates teacher and my understanding of the importance of alignment, of the importance of powerhouse strength, and all of these things. So I asked her, I said, so what? I'm just interested. I won't take it personally, but what's your beef with Pilates? And she said that she found it too complicated and too technical. Now, again, this kind of interested me because if you read anything that Joseph Pilates wrote or said in an interview in his lifetime, that is precisely what he did not want. What he wanted to do was create something that was simple, that was relatively easy to replicate, and that everybody from children to folks in senior centers could do with minimal hassle. Now, by the same token, the man was an inventor, right? So he was constantly inventing things. And the one piece of equipment that he did patent was the universal reformer. But he didn't patent the magic circle. He didn't patent the foot corrector. He did the toe correctors, the breathalyzers, the Cadillac, the armchairs, the Wonder chairs, like all the things. He didn't, because frankly, as I discussed with Joan Breitbart in the last episode, getting a patent is an ordeal. It's a multi-year expensive ordeal. And you may not know this, but Joe Pilates died broke and angry. So, for a variety of reasons that we don't need to get into in this particular episode. But so I basically responded and said, wow, that's kind of interesting. And she said that she didn't like the equipment, that she found the equipment to be confusing, and that she found the exercises to be too complicated and too technical. Now, here's the deal. It is incumbent on people like me as Pilates professionals to make Pilates accessible and to actually make people wish to do Pilates and try Pilates. And one of the worst things that we can do for our own Pilates businesses, as well as just for the world of Pilates generally, is make things non-accessible by, number one, requiring the use of big pieces of equipment that cost thousands of dollars and take up tons of room. Okay. And we'll talk about that in a second. And by trying to make the exercises much more technical than they really are. In reality, and most trainers, most Pilates teachers, most yoga teachers know this, there are about 10 exercises that we do. We do them in different ways, in different stances, in different relationships to gravity. But, for most of my clients, they don't see that huge of a difference between doing a squat and doing a deadlift. Okay. Not a stiff-legged deadlift, but, a basic picking heavy stuff up off the floor deadlift. And they don't see a huge difference between the squat, between the deadlift, and the bridge. And that's because, my friends, there isn't a huge difference between the squat, the deadlift, and the bridge. They all work on a hip hinge. They all work on similar muscle groups. Again, different relationships to gravity, right? Different parts that are moving, different purpose for the end goal of the exercise. So, yeah, we have choreography in Pilates, but that doesn't have to be all flowery and complex. The exercises in Pilates, if you look at them, are actually quite simple, right? If you think about it from a client perspective or a teaching perspective, especially if you work, within somewhat of teaching Joe's order of the exercises, we always start out with some kind of footwork, right? So if we're doing a mat class, like if you take my online classes, we always start standing with some standing footwork. And that's essentially just a standing squat series that we do in different leg positions, right? We do them heels together, toes apart with the heels down, heels together, toes apart, lifting the heels. We do them with the whole leg, with the legs just squeezed together in a total parallel close stance. We do it with the weight shifted back onto the heels. We do heel lifts and lowers. But it's essentially squats. Okay. But, we call it footwork. If we're in a studio, we might do that on the reformer. We might do it on the chair sitting. We might do it with the leg springs. But essentially, we're still doing the same thing which is a squat series. Okay. Then if you look at the other exercises, I mean, we do several versions of a roll up during the mat. We do several versions of bridging exercises during the mat. We do several versions of front planks, of side planks, of reverse planks. We have different names for them. We do different rolling exercises. We do some seated work, saw, spine stretch, spine twist. Again, we do teaser, which you see as a V-sit or you see as boat in yoga. Like, none of these are necessarily proprietary exercises that you see nowhere else in the known world. Okay. So we don't have to make things so complicated. As a younger teacher, I was kind of into making things a little more complicated and complex, basically to kind of show what I know or what I knew. But now I don't feel the need to do that anymore. For me, the beauty of Pilates is making the complex simple so that it's easy to understand in the brain. It's also easy to understand in the body, and therefore the body knows what to do. I've also worked with people who were developmentally disabled. And for those folks, the work and the movement still helped them in terms of how they were feeling and functioning without having to get extraordinarily complex and extraordinarily technical. Now, if we look at the Pilates apparatus, once again, the universal reformer is, the main piece that people are thinking about. But in terms of just using springs for resistance, you can do so much with tubing, especially with the Slastics tubing that's like fabric covered so it doesn't wear out over time. There's actually quite a few people in this world who are selling in-home Pilates apparatus to mimic your reformer. And you know what they're selling? They're selling basically Slastics covered resistance tubing with straps and handles attached that you can then attach to your door or your wall. And by doing that and packaging it and calling it, your new in-home, Pilates reformer substitute, they can charge $100 for something that you could basically buy on Amazon for 15 to 20. And in fact, if you look at the show notes in the last episode, I have some links to small pieces of apparatus that you can purchase yourself on Amazon and have, at home. So I was really kind of taken aback because, we're looking at an exercise method that was said by its creator to have been invented to be able to be done by anybody, to be simple, and really to be mat-based. Okay. When he started doing and teaching those exercises, Joseph Pilates was interned by the British as an enemy alien during the First World War. So, he was still in his brain inventing, but he was just more concerned with kind of keeping people alive, moving, and sane through the end of the war. And he also claimed that the men who worked out with him didn't die in the influenza epidemic. And whether that's true or not, that's just a big deal. Now, what I do know is true is that very few of the men in the camp with him died in the influenza epidemic compared to kind of global statistics. So whatever we want to take from that, we can take from that. But he always claimed that, doing the exercises with him every day as they could. And, he also created the exercises to be done in a small space, to be done in a relatively short period of time, so that, you could really get it done on a daily basis and kind of get everything you needed for your body. You get all the parts moving. You would also get all the parts that needed stabilizing. The joints that needed motion would get motion. and everybody would feel better. And it looks, if you look at some of the videos online of Joe teaching some outdoor classes, like at Jacob's Pillow in the summer, you can kind of get an idea of the kind of class that he taught, because he starts out with everyone standing. They're doing a lot of jumping jacks and knee lifts and running in place and different boxing punches and different kicking, like kickboxing things, and the standing footwork. And this was all before they even got down on the mat. So there's a bunch of like archival standing work that we know Joseph Pilates taught. So people were already warm and sweaty before they got on the mat to do their 100. Okay. So this kind of thing that we all had in our head, that the 100 was the warm up. Not so much. Okay. You did the 100 after you got done doing all of the other stuff, much of which included jumping. You also see where he worked a lot with just springs attached to a wall, or, in the studio, we work with the tower or we work with the Cadillac. But, you could measure out a tower or a Cadillac, see where those eye-rings are, and replicate those hard attachment points in your home, or in your garage or someplace. And you could use bands or tubing with a wall anchor on those attachment points, or frankly, you could just get springs. Either way, you're going to be getting the same work. None of this is super complex. None of this should make somebody feel like they don't want to deal with Pilates because it's so overdone and overcomplicated and requires basically so much shit, so much big shit that we have to either go to a studio for or have a whole separate space for in our homes, because it's just not true. I did an episode recently, if you look back, I believe it's episode 3, that's on you don't need Pilates equipment, because you really don't. And you really can outfit yourself at home to mimic, I would say, at least 80% to 90% of the exercises you would see in the studio on equipment. And for a lot of the exercises on the apparatus that are more advanced and more difficult, you can talk to friends of yours who teach Pilates or teach fitness, and they'll tell you how often we teach those exercises, which is extraordinarily rarely, usually to other Pilates teachers, and usually when there's a workshop, so that there's an audience that actually wants to see those exercises being done. Most of those super advanced or super flowery or super choreographically intense exercises, we don't usually teach in the studio. So why we would expect that people were going to be doing them at home is kind of beyond me. You can really set yourself up for an awesome Pilates experience without having to go near a fully equipped Pilates studio. Folks who own fully equipped Pilates studios, however, because they have spent usually upwards of mid 5 figures on all of their equipment, okay? Because your average reformer or Cadillac or tower is several $1,000s, plus shipping. And at this point, everybody's got like a 9-month waiting list because of supply side issues. But people who have gone through the time, money, and energy it takes to fully equip a Pilates studio, I can guarantee you that those teachers are going to tell you that you need to do Pilates equipment. Because I've been there. And frankly, when you need to get to a place where that equipment's paid for itself. Okay. And the only way you do that is by getting bodies in the studio on the apparatus. So Of course, a Pilates studio owner of a fully equipped studio is going to be all about all of that equipment and getting you to want to use it. But I would have clients at Real Pilates and in my own studios at Balance Center who weren't huge fans of the equipment and still wanted to come into the studio, but wanted to do mostly mat work still in privates. And that's when I learned that the value of Pilates, and I'm saying this to you as a Pilates teacher of over 33 years, and I'm talking to everybody, clients and teachers and studio owners and trainees, all of you. It is, the value is in the work. The value is in you teaching your clients how to move well and how to feel better and work better in their own bodies. That is what people are paying for. People are not just paying to be a body on your reformer. People are not just paying to be a body on your mat. People are not just paying because you put them on the high chair or gave them something on the Cadillac. Okay, people are paying for the value of spending maybe 1 to 2 hours a week doing things that help them stay out of pain and feel and function better when they're not in the studio. The end game is about what they're doing and how they're feeling in their bodies when they're not in the studio. And whether they're on Pilates equipment or not, and what brand of Pilates equipment they're on, doesn't matter. Okay, what matters is that they are getting the work. Now, a lot of folks poo-poo the classical order of the exercises, but if you teach Pilates, or even if you do Pilates and you don't know the classical order of the exercises or what was close to Joe's order that they taught in his studio, I recommend that you go online and find out. There's a few groups. I know Sunny Almond's Going More Joe group on Facebook. She has some of the original lists of exercises for mat and all of the apparatus. If you just go in and Google, classical Pilates mat order, you'll get a few websites that actually list out the full mat. And it makes sense if you look at it. And the reason why it makes sense is that Joe moves people from using bigger muscles to get warmer to using smaller muscles. He works people through breathing. He works people through first more gentle movements of the arms, of the legs, of the hips and the knees and the shoulders, and then bigger movements. Okay. Again, you see a distinct, always starting with footwork and kind of bigger movements of the legs and the lower body, and then moving towards the upper body and more balancing work. So all of this is important because, number one, if you've only worked in a space where they're picking and choosing what exercises they give you, and there never seems to be an order or a rhyme or a reason, okay, then you're kind of missing out on some of the more global benefits of Pilates. You are. I think you're also missing out on the ability to really look at what you've done and see if you're getting better in any way, shape, or form, if you're getting stronger, if things are getting easier, if you could do more of them, if you could do them differently, however that looks for you. But it's also important because he really developed an order of exercises that works well for the body. And you can modify things. You can take things out that don't work for you. You can do whatever you want. But when you really start to look at what Joe Pilates himself was putting out there and what he was saying about his work, he wanted things to be simple. He wanted his work, he wanted Contrology to be available to everybody, whether they could get to a Pilates studio or Contrology studio or not, whether they could afford the apparatus or not. Whatever that looked like, Joe wanted people to do his work. And his work is not complicated. His work is not technical. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So if you are somebody who has been kind of staying away or steering past Pilates, because as a client, you feel like it's going to be too much for you, too technical, you don't want to deal with all the apparatus, I encourage you to, head on over to my Strong Bones Pilates studio online and, try one of my classes. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you're a teacher who finds that your understanding of Pilates is very complex and technical, and you haven't found a way to simplify it for yourself, let alone teach it in a more simplified manner, I also encourage you to get in touch with me because I can help you on that end too through my work in the Pilates Teacher Mastermind, which is really what we do there. So that's it. That's my rant for today. Pilates does not have to be complicated, and keep it as simple as possible. And you will continue feeling and functioning better using the Pilates exercises. I will talk to you guys in a couple days. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.